Yes, good morning, everybody in Cape Town. My apologies for not being there in person, but I'm virtually with you there now. I will be giving you the experience of South Sudan of being a landlocked country. And I will give you first a brief background on the disadvantages that landlocked countries face. Of course, being landlocked means that you don't have access to open water shores. And generally, being landlocked creates some political and economic disadvantage that having access to international waters would avoid. For this reason, that's why through history, colonization happened because of that. Big nations and some smaller one, which was well developed, tried to have access to open waters so that they can have political capital, and then they will also have access to international markets. The economic disadvantage of being landlocked can be alleviated or aggravated depending on the degree of the development of the countries. And then the surrounding routes and the freedom of trade, language barriers, and other considerations. If you look like, European countries like Austria, like Switzerland, they are landlocked, but because they are well developed and they have got well trade routes, they don't really have problem of being a landlocked country. Currently, it is those countries that are classified as landlocked developing countries, which are called LLDCs, that faces the typical challenges that a common landlocked countries faces. Some of those challenges are dependency on infrastructure of countries that have coastal access. And then there's also low interest in investment from private sector in those landlocked countries, especially ICT infrastructures. Also, the high cost of infrastructure development in landlocked countries. Transport routes to landlocked countries are also very difficult, long and expensive. And they are also remote from world markets. However, if a country address ICT connectivity, then they will, address some of those challenges, especially like, due lack of access to the ports, the long distances to the ports, inadequate telecommunication and ICT infrastructure, inadequate transport infrastructure, and the cumbersome custom and border crossing procedures. Those can be addressed or improved using ICT connectivity. So currently South Sudan lacks really an operational, national or domestic broadband backbone. It depends, and now currently only we have access through Uganda border, which is just a short connection, about more than 200 kilometers of fiber from the Uganda border to the capital, Juba. That's the only broadband connectivity South Sudan has got. However, through development partners and regional initiatives, such as the one of Horn of Africa Initiative, and then the World Bank Africa Regional Digital Integration Project, South Sudan is trying to address this issue of ICT infrastructure or broadband, national broadband backbone. At the moment, we have a priority gap that we wanted to close, and that is a route from Kenya border to South Sudan capital, Juba. And that is due to the good connectivity and presence of content in Kenya. We also plan additional routes within South Sudan that are to connect to Central African Republic, to connect to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and of course, Uganda, already connected. Also, we recently had some discussions with Ethiopia that we also wanted to connect to Ethiopia and then to Djibouti. South Sudan being in the middle of Africa, actually, it's an advantage of being a landlocked country. We can put ourselves as a hub in Africa. We can connect the cables that are landing in the eastern coast of Africa, that is in the Indian Ocean, with those landing in the western coast of Africa. And so we will create, we will create redundancy, good, excellent redundancy, that if there's failure in the eastern part, the western part, can come in. And we are more nearer to all these two sides of Africa than any other country. And so that is one of the disadvantages of being a landlocked country like South Sudan. In fact, we found out that we analyzed that for us to improve of adequate national broadband and cross-border fiber connections, we have to have access to multiple high-capacity routes for the first mile that we are trying to create. And then also we have to have multiple routing options to the middle mile and the regional nodes. Second, a national fiber backbone connecting the entry point of international connectivity to major population centers. And to ensure resilience, all the population centers ideally should be connected via at least 2 geo-redundant routes to eliminate single point failure. As I've already said before, that we are being, a hub and providing that redundancy between the eastern and the western coast of Africa, and likewise also for the northern and central and southern countries of Africa. 3, resilience cross borders routes to import traffic destination. For example, major submarine cables and distance content, local or regional hubs, data centers, content delivery networks, and internet exchange points. So these 3 points, South Sudan have to have it so that it has a resilient national backbone infrastructure. Concerning access to information, global traffic patterns indicate that content is tending to be more localized. And the key drivers for this is that the deployment of caches by major players like Google, Meta, which is Facebook, and companies like Netflix, which is operating networks or internet exchanges, it is not unusual to see approximately 50% of traffic becoming local when the top 4 or 5 content delivery networks are deployed in a country. Major internet players and cloud providers such as Amazon, Google, Meta, and Microsoft are deploying data centers within regions to keep traffic within that region. Also, it is evident that governments and companies are deploying and hosting services domestically instead of used to host them abroad. Also, internet exchange points are keeping traffic local and exchanging traffic between networks without need to reach far away nodes. In Africa, this you can find really in Kenya and Nigeria, even in South Africa. And from 2012 up to 2020, in Kenya or Nigeria, the traffic has jumped from 30%, the local traffic has jumped from 30% to 70%. And that is due to the establishment of local data centers, internet exchanges points, and then content delivery networks. Presently, South Sudan is planning localization of its data through establishment of data centers, which are needed to host the CDNs, the cloud providers, and internet exchange points. Typically, every major operator has data centers to host its network equipment. These operators' data center sometimes host caches from major content providers or CDNs, such as Google, Meta, Netflix, and offer some co-location spaces to third parties. The largest internet players, for example, Google, Meta, and Microsoft, deploy very large data centers, which are in hyperscale at key hubs locations, while carrier-neutral data centers cater to a broad range of co-location customers, including edge nodes of the hyperscalers to bring content and services closer to customers. And that is what South Sudan is planning. And hopefully by the middle of next year, we will establish those data centers and we will be going live to provide more connectivity and more access to information to the citizens of South Sudan. In brief, that is the experience of South Sudan of being a landlocked country. Thank you.